Did you know that the greatest library of ancient Indian thought was transmitted for over 3,000 years with practically zero errors, and it wasn't written down anywhere, it was entirely in the air?
Yeah, and that's just the beginning, honestly. The method they use to memorize it is mathematically impossible to break.
Welcome, Dead Set. History. Checked. Today, we are going on a deep dive into the Vedas and the Upanishads.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. And the mission for you listening right now is to understand exactly how an entire civilization managed to preserve its most vital foundational knowledge, not by carving it into stone or, hoarding it in gold, but through the perfect frequency of the human voice.
Which is just a profound shift in how we think about information today. Like when we look back at the origins of the Vedas, roughly between 1500 and 1200 BCE in what is now the Punjab and Pakistan region, we're dealing with a society that viewed the world fundamentally differently than we do.
Right.
They classified these texts as Shruti.
So Shruti translates to that which is heard. But they didn't mean hearing a lecture, did they?
No, not at all. They meant hearing the universe itself. The ancient seers, the rishis, didn't view themselves as authors drafting a document.
They were more like human antennas picking up a cosmic broadcast during states of deep meditation.
Precisely. The texts were considered aparusya, meaning they were not of human origin. They truly believed they were capturing the literal vibrations of the universe.
Wow.
And because the vibration itself was sacred, writing it down was considered a severe degradation. To the ancient Indo-Aryans, writing was a dead medium.
I mean, if you write something on a palm leaf, it rots.
Exactly. If you carve it into stone, it eventually erodes. And worse, if you hand it to a human scribe, that scribe will inevitably introduce a typo.
But wait, if their entire culture recognized that physical things decay, like that the leaf rots and the stone erodes, why would they trust human memory? To us, human memory is the most fragile medium of all.
Well, because they didn't just trust passive memory, they engineered it. They believed the power of these texts lay entirely in the precise sound frequency.
So change a single syllable and you alter the cosmic vibration.
Right. So to prevent human error, the rishis developed what modern computer scientists immediately recognize as error correction codes. They created incredibly complex recitation styles called pathas.
So because a single drop syllable would ruin the frequency, they basically invented an ancient audio blockchain.
Yeah.
Like digital parody bits, but using human vocal cords.
That is the perfect analogy, and the mechanics of it are incredibly rigorous. If you take a standard line of text, you and I just read it sequentially. Word 1, word 2, word 3.
Sure.
The rishis started with the Kramapatha, which is a paired recitation. You chant 1, 2, then 2, 3, then 3, 4.
Oh, right, creating an overlapping chain.
Exactly. But that wasn't secure enough. So they developed the Jatapatha, which weaves the words backward and forward. So it's 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2.
Oh, it sounds exhausting.
It gets wilder. The ultimate encryption was the Ganapatha. This is a literal mathematical bell pattern. The priest chants 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3.
Which makes it functionally impossible to drop or alter a syllable without the entire rhythm immediately derailing. The error just exposes itself instantly.
Exactly.
Well, let me push back on this a bit. If you spend 3,000 years perfectly preserving the sound of a word using mathematical chanting, how do we know the meaning of the word didn't drift? I mean, languages evolve.
That is a crucial point, and it's something linguists study intensely. The fascinating answer is that to the rishis, the phonetic structure was the primary meaning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sonic architecture was the priority over the semantic definition. But because the texts were locked into these rigid, mathematically precise metrical structures, the vocabulary was essentially frozen in amber.
So the grammar couldn't drift because the syntax was entirely dependent on the algorithm of the chant.
Precisely. It's an absolute inversion of how we think about legacy. We trust external hard drives, but they trusted internal architecture.
And what they were preserving through this audio blockchain were the four pillars of their worldview, right? The four Vedas.
Yes. And what's interesting is how they aren't just a random collection of books. They represent a clear, functional evolution of a society. You can trace the exact maturation of their rituals.
Starting with the oldest one.
Right. It begins with the Rig Veda, the oldest pillar, containing 1,028 hymns. This is the foundational mythology, the poetic bedrock dedicated to deities like Agni, the fire god, and Indra, the warrior king.
But pure poetry isn't enough for a structured communal ritual, is it?
Exactly. Poetry needs to be performed. It needs rhythm to unify a crowd, which necessitates the second pillar, the Samaveda.
So they added music.
Yep. The priests took the verses of the Rig Veda and engineered specific musical notations for them. If you want to find the absolute structural root of all Indian classical music, you are looking at the Samaveda.
That's incredible.
But once you have the music, you need the physical action. You can't just sing. You have to pour the ghee into the fire at the exact right moment.
Which brings in the Ayurveda, basically the stage directions.
Yes, the Yajurveda contains the exact prose formulas and physical protocols for the sacrifices. It is the manual for maintaining cosmic order.
And finally, once the grand cosmic rituals are established, you have to address the everyday human condition. That is the Atharva Veda.
The Veda of the common person.
I find the Atharva Veda so compelling because it drops the lofty cosmic architecture and suddenly gets very grounded.
Oh, totally.
Like it spells for romantic success, charms to break a fever, rituals to keep your cattle safe. It reveals that the baseline anxieties of humanity haven't shifted an inch in 3 millennia.
They really haven't.
Yeah.
But, underneath all of this structure, there is a seed of radical doubt. If you look at the oldest text, the Rig Veda, you find the Nasadiya Sukta, the creation hymn.
I wanted to bring this up because it completely shatters our modern expectation of ancient religion.
It really does.
Usually, a foundational religious text is aggressively dogmatic. It tells you exactly who the creator is, what they want, and how they built the world. But the creation hymn ends with total cosmic agnosticism.
Right. It openly suggests that maybe the creator in the highest heaven doesn't even know how the universe began.
Wait, really? It says that?
Yeah. Then there was neither non-existence nor existence. It ends with a profound cosmic shrug.
Which is wild for a religious text.
And that skepticism is vital. It proves that even at the height of this highly structured, mathematically precise ritual culture, the rishis were intellectually honest enough to admit the limits of their own systems.
That hymn is the crack in the dam.
Exactly. It shows a society outgrowing the physical fire sacrifice.
Because pouring butter into a fire altar, no matter how geometrically perfect the altar is, cannot answer the question of whether the universe has a fundamental purpose.
Exactly, which triggers history's first massive existential dropout movement.
I love that framing.
Around 800 BCE, we see a profound societal pivot. Seekers begin abandoning the rigid, ritualistic villages. They retreat into the forests.
Right.
And these forest philosophers begin developing the texts we now know as the Upanishads.
And the word Upanishad literally means sitting down near. So you're no longer observing a massive public ritual. You are sitting at the feet of a teacher in the woods, engaging in intense psychological inquiry.
It is a complete pivot from external religion to internal philosophy. From Karmakanda, the path of ritual action, to Janakanda, the path of inner knowledge.
So this was basically history's first massive reevaluation of reality.
Absolutely. And out in those forests, they construct a metaphysical framework that fundamentally alters human history. They introduce 4 world-shaking concepts.
Let's go through those.
The first is Brahman, the ultimate impersonal reality that underlies the entire cosmos.
Okay.
The second is Atman, the eternal soul or the true self within the individual.
But here's the massive psychological leap. Taking this vast external cosmic order, Brahman, and claiming it is entirely identical to the Atman, the individual self.
Yes.
That's not just a philosophical shift, that is a complete restructuring of human identity.
And to explain why we don't naturally feel like we are one with the universe, they formalize the third concept, Maya.
Right, the cosmic illusion.
Exactly. Maya is the trick of the mind that forces us to perceive reality as billions of separate, fragmented pieces. Like you, me, the tree, the fire, rather than one unified, continuous whole.
The illusion of separation, which sets up their ultimate thesis, the fourth concept, Tat Tivamasi, that thou art.
You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop.
But abstract concepts like that don't survive for thousands of years without a narrative vehicle. They needed to make this visceral for the listener.
Which is why the Upanishads rely heavily on dramatic allegory. Take the famous story from the Chandogya Upanishad.
Oh, this is a great one.
A boy named Shvetiketu returns home after years of traditional, rigid schooling. He is arrogant, bloated with textbook knowledge.
Basically every new grad ever.
Pretty much. His father realizes the boy knows all the facts but misses the underlying truth. So he tells Shveteke to bring him a fruit from the massive banyan tree outside.
The father has him break it open and asks what he sees, and Shvetiketu says, tiny seeds.
Then the father tells him to break open one of those microscopic seeds and asks, "What do you see now?" Shvetiketu squints and says, "Nothing."
Just emptiness.
And the father responds, "That nothing That invisible, subtle essence is the exact source from which this massive, towering banyan tree grows. And you are that, Shvatakatu.
Tatavamasi.
Exactly. The invisible essence driving the cosmos is the exact same invisible essence looking out through your eyes.
It's such a brilliant pedagogical tool. They use the physical world to prove the metaphysical.
And they didn't shy away from the darkest aspects of the human experience either. If you look at the Katha Upanishad, the narrative is literally a conversation with death.
Yeah, let's talk about the Katha Upanishad because it's arguably their narrative masterpiece.
It centers on a young boy, Nachiketa, who travels to the gates in the underworld and simply waits for Yama, the god of death.
Which is a bold move.
Very bold. When Yama arrives, he is deeply unsettled by this living boy and tries to bribe him to leave. He offers chariots, unimaginable wealth, infinite lifespans, beautiful companions.
But Nachiketa rejects it all with a devastating piece of logic. He points out that everything Yama is offering is subject to decay.
Because they are physical things.
Right. Since Yama is the god of death, Yama will eventually consume all those gifts anyway. Nachiketa basically says, I don't want temporary distractions. I only want the secret of what remains after you take the body.
Yama, seeing the boy cannot be bought, finally teaches him the allegory of the chariot. He maps human psychology centuries before the field of psychology even existed.
This is the part that blows my mind.
He tells Nachiketa that the human body is a chariot. The horses pulling the chariot are your senses, constantly reacting to the environment, pulling you toward pleasure and away from pain.
Okay.
The reins controlling those horses are your mind, and the driver holding the reins is your intellect, your decision-making faculty.
But the crucial piece is the passenger. The passenger sitting quietly in the back of the chariot, simply observing the ride, is the Atman, the true self.
Yes.
So, let me get this straight. This psychological separation of you from your thoughts feels incredibly modern for 800 BCE. We pay cognitive behavioral therapists today to teach us exactly that.
Oh, absolutely.
They tell us, you are not the horses, and you're not even the reins, you are the observer.
It is the absolute foundation of mindfulness. And the Mandukya Upanishad takes this map of consciousness even further, breaking it down into 4 highly technical states.
Let's break those down.
The first is waking consciousness, where you interact with the external world. The second is the dreaming state, where your mind turns inward and constructs its own reality.
And the third?
The third is deep sleep, a state of complete dreamless unconsciousness.
But they identify a fourth state, don't they? Turiya.
Turiya translates simply to the fourth, but it isn't a state you enter or leave like sleep. It is the pure, underlying, witnessing consciousness that exists constantly.
The silent observer.
Exactly. It's the part of you that knows you are awake, knows you are dreaming, and knows you experienced deep sleep. To represent this, they mapped these 4 states onto a single, profound sound. OM.
Because OM is actually composed of 3 distinct phonetic sounds, right?
Okay.
A-U-M.
You got it. A represents the waking state. U represents the dreaming state. M represents deep sleep.
So what about Turiya?
Well, the genius of the Mandukya Upanishad is what happens next. The chant ends, and the unbroken silence that follows the M. That silence is Turiya.
Oh, wow.
It is the canvas upon which the sound was painted.
The sound before the word and the silence after it. That level of philosophical precision is just astounding.
It truly is.
But it brings up an interesting deduction. If these ancient thinkers were mapping the internal world, the mind, the states of consciousness, with scientific, almost mathematical rigor, that same demand for exactness must have applied to their physical rituals, right?
Absolutely. And this is where history routinely gets checked. When we analyze the Ayurveda, the manual for those ancient fire sacrifices, we find advanced geometry hidden in plain sight.
Wait, really?
Yes. They outline the exact mathematical principles of the Pythagorean theorem centuries before Pythagoras was even born.
Which raises the question, why does a culture that ultimately concludes the physical world is an illusion need advanced geometry for a fire pit?
Because in the Vedic worldview, before the philosophical shift of the Upanishads, the ritual was the mechanism that kept the cosmos from collapsing. The altars weren't simple campfires.
They were massive, intricate geometric structures, right?
Built from specific numbers of carefully fired bricks, designed in the shapes of falcons or tortoises. The myth was in service of the sacred.
To generate the correct cosmic frequency, the physical geometry of the altar had to mirror the perfection of the heavens.
Exactly. That intersection of engineering and theology is fascinating. And, the standard historical narrative doesn't just underestimate their science, it completely misrepresents their social dynamics.
Yes, there's a persistent assumption that this era of antiquity was just a monolithic patriarchy.
That is a massive misconception. When we actually read the texts, particularly the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, we find the Rishikas.
The female seers.
Right, at least 27 of them. These were women who were not just passively participating, they were actively composing seminal hymns and driving the philosophical boundaries.
The story of Maitreyi is a perfect example of this.
Yes, Maitreyi is a powerhouse. She engages in fierce public philosophical debates with Yajnavalkya, one of the greatest male sages of the era.
And she isn't debating trivialities either.
Not at all. She challenges the very notion that material wealth can provide immortality, pushing him to articulate the deepest truths of the Atman. The historical record clearly shows women operating at the absolute zenith of intellectual and spiritual leadership.
And speaking of correcting the historical record, we have to talk about the Sarasvati River dating controversy.
Oh, this is a big one.
Because if you look at the linguistics, Western historians generally date the start of the Vedas to around 1500 BCE. But the texts themselves describe a landscape that completely contradicts that timeline.
Right. Throughout the Rig Veda, there are constant, vivid praises of the Sarasvati, describing it as a mighty, roaring river flowing from the mountains to the sea.
But for generations, Western scholars dismissed this as a mythological river, right?
Because it didn't exist on any modern map, so they just assumed it was a metaphor.
Until modern satellite imagery got involved.
Exactly. Geological surveys and satellite imaging tracked a massive ancient riverbed running right through the region, perfectly matching the Vedic descriptions.
But the geological data revealed something that threw a massive wrench into the established timeline, didn't it?
It did. Severe tectonic shifts caused this mighty river to completely dry up around 1900 BCE.
Wait. If the satellite data proves the river dried up in 1900 BCE, but standard history says the text started in 1500 BCE, the historians are off by at least half a millennium. They were describing a landscape that no longer existed.
Which is why many Indian scholars, using that geological data alongside astronomical alignments hidden in the texts.
Like descriptions of the stars.
Yeah, descriptions of the exact positions of the stars during specific rituals. They argue that the oral memory of these hymns dates back to 4000 BCE, or even older.
Wow.
The linguistic evolution of Sanskrit might date to 1500 BCE, but the memory it encoded is ancient.
An oral memory preserved through thousands of years of tectonic shifts and societal collapse, purely through human vocal cords. It is an unmatched intellectual achievement.
Truly. And what's really compelling is how this ancient framework eventually migrated and fundamentally reshaped the modern West.
Yes. When the Upanishads were finally translated into European languages in the 19th century, they hit Western philosophy like a lightning bolt.
Arthur Schopenhauer, the great German philosopher, kept a copy on his desk. He read them every single night before sleep, famously writing that they were the solace of my life and of my death.
But it goes way beyond abstract philosophy. It impacted the architects of the 20th century. Look at Carl Jung.
Right.
Jung built his massive psychological framework of the collective unconscious, heavily relying on the Upanishadic model of Brahman and Atman.
He used it to explain how human beings individuate and connect to the broader human experience.
And perhaps the most dramatic modern application was J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer actually learned Sanskrit specifically to read these texts in their original form.
When the first atomic bomb detonated at Trinity, he famously quoted the Bhagavad Gita, a text that is the direct philosophical heir to the Upanishads.
But he didn't just use it for a poetic quote. Oppenheimer utilized the Vedic framework of duty without attachment to mentally process the terrible, world-altering responsibility of the Manhattan Project.
He used a 3,000-year-old oral tradition to navigate the ethics of a nuclear weapon. The ripples of this ancient audio blockchain are woven right into the fabric of our modern world.
It's incredible to think about.
Which brings us right back to you listening to this right now. We exist in a landscape defined by doom scrolling, fragmented attention spans, and absolute information overload.
It's true.
In a very real sense, we are drowning in our own modern Maya, an illusion of endless, disconnected, shallow noise. But these texts offer the ultimate shortcut to grounding yourself.
They really do.
They are a millennia-old reminder that the most profound truths aren't found by frantically absorbing more data from a glowing rectangle.
Yeah.
They are found by turning inward, taking a seat in the back of the chariot, and recognizing the quiet observer underneath the noise.
And that leaves us with one final perspective to consider. We've just explored how an ancient civilization managed to perfectly preserve a massive library of complex metaphysical wisdom and advanced math for thousands of years. They didn't rely on ink, paper, or stone.
Like what?
They relied entirely on the human mind, mathematical rhythms, and error-correcting vocal codes. Now look at how we operate today. What crucial knowledge of ours are we blindly outsourcing to fragile hard drives and temporary cloud servers?
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
Systems that could be completely wiped out by a single solar flare or a corrupted database. By outsourcing our memory to machines, we have to ask ourselves, have we actually lost the art of remembering?
That's it from Dead Set History. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.